Hey everyone. Please support what I do to help keep Greyhawk alive by subscribing to the channel. Also, please consider becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, exclusive live chats, quarterly adventure modules, and more. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
I've always been fascinated by the Duchy of Tenh up in the north, and that's what we're going to talk about today on Greyhawk. So the Duchy of Tenh, which is right there on the map behind me, is a nation in the world of Greyhawk. Obviously, it's a Flan nation, meaning its people are predominantly of the Flan race, and it's got a kind of an interesting history. I just want to pick it up real quick. The name, by the way, comes from Dave Arneson's Blackmoor campaign, just like the Duchy of Blackmoor up here. We have the Duchy of Tenh down here. In 1987, I believe it was, TSR came out with a DA4 Duchy of Ten module for basic Dungeons and Dragons, but that was actually relating to Dave Arneson's campaign, which they had been in the process of writing a bunch of modules for. DA standing for Dave Arneson, obviously. But Gygax had used some of the names from Arneson's campaign in Greyhawk. I think at some point with the idea of maybe, when they were still on relatively good terms, they could, Gygax could farm out parts of the world of Greyhawk to different authors, just like he did with Len Lakofka and so forth. And but of course, obviously, with all the things that happened between Gygax and Arneson, that never materialized. But the names were still in the setting. Um, so in the guide to the world of Greyhawk from the gold box and the folio, we have the Duchy of Ten. Uh, with a population of 200,000, numerous demi-humans, numerous humanoids in the mountains around it. Um, uh, the fertile lands prove sanctuary and home to Flan tribesmen, as the influx of Orids and Sul peoples elsewhere drove them off or absorbed them. So basically, this was a sort of a Flanaess outpost in a sea awash with the refugees from the twin cataclysms way off to the west. About the time Erdi began to expand, the Ten created their own state from the diverse groups within the boundaries of their land, and the greatest leader was proclaimed Duke. The realm has retained its freedom and independence down to this day, although it is continually troubled by bandits from the west, raiders from the north, marauding humanoids, and border clashes with the theocracy of the Pale. They have medium cavalry and footmen armed with short bow and pole arms, and that's all you get um, out of this. So you get this um, uh, this picture drawn in just a few sentences of a separate nation because they're racially different from the lands around them. They're not Iridian or Sul. They're Flan, and that's kind of a rare thing for there to be actually a Flan nation state. But they're also beset by monsters from the mountains. They've got uh, uh, the rovers of the Barrens will be continually raiding over these hills. We've got Stonefist up here who would be raiding through the mountain passes. So you've got the bandit kingdoms here, so there's raiding there, and then there's warfare with Pale. So they're like surrounded, and this is going to lead to a kind of a siege mentality en masse. And later on, we learn, which I'll get to in a second. We learn that the army was very stilted and bureaucratic and set in its ways, and the society as a whole, because they were very lawful um, in the alignment sense, they held on to traditions and protocol and so forth to a point which was actually detrimental to them. And then we find out what happened to them in the Greyhawk Wars. They were basically destroyed by Stonefist with the Stonehold slash Stonefist. Um, who did not, in fact, come through the passes. During the Greyhawk Wars, the raiders from Stonehold came around the mountains and hit them that way, and they weren't expecting it. So they were destroyed. There were tens of thousands of casualties, and after the wars, the Duchy of Tenh is basically occupied by Stonehold, Stonefist. I'm going to use those words interchangeably, even though they start as Stonefist and they turn into Stonehold. Yeah. Anyway, um, so they're this occupied land, and they're not directly occupied by Ayuz, because Ayuz needs his armies elsewhere. He's content to let the stone fists occupy the land for him because it frees up troops for other things, and he still keeps a watch on what's going on to the east. But because the stone fists are now have hostile enemies to their east with the Sul barbarians, once the whole Vatun um, illusion was made known, where Ayus had pretended to be one of their gods to get them into the war. Then they found out, and they were all mad, But the Stone Fists are still around, and Ayus's agents are all over the Duchy of Ten as it's occupied. But again, it's not a formal Ayusian conquest. It's technically under the Stone Fist. Um, and but his agents have charmed and are otherwise manipulating the leaders there and the priesthoods and things like that. So you've got this situation where the Tenha, um, which is what you call people from Ten. I love that. The army used to be called the Tenha Host, which is just one of those lovely evocative names that you get out of Gygax. Um, so basically, they're being occupied, but it's kind of an uneasy thing. The troops who are there from Stonefist don't want to be there because they want to be out raiding. They don't want to be garrisoning some country. A lot of them are pressuring that they just want to burn the place down and go home. So there's these tensions in Ten, which are really good and something that you could easily exploit in an adventure. Now, ultimately, that is indeed what happened. Um, the powerful charm spell that Ayuz had cast upon the head of Stonehold, uh, was broken somehow, and Sevord Redbeard had ordered the killing of a bunch of Ayuz's agents. Um, the barbarians from the east were raiding into Stonehold, so all of the folks, all of the people who were occupying it wanted to go back, and they withdrew out of Ten, and that signaled that armies from the Theocracy of the Pale, which had absorbed a bunch of Tenha refugees, went into Ten to try to reconquer it and turn it into a not a vassal state, but a close ally of the Pale. And at the same time, the exiled Duke was able to go in with a an army of his own, and he took over the city of Redspan, which was on the border of the Band of Kingdoms here. So it's on the border of what is now Ayuz's empire, and there was an Iusian army there, and then there were a bunch of battles and so forth. So where we stand at the in the year 591 common year is that there are the forces of Stonefist are largely gone. They have a little bit right in the north around the mountain passes, but that's it. So the land is no longer occupied, and it's being fought over essentially by the Duke, who had been exiled when the land was conquered, and an invading army from its neighbor, the Pale, which isn't exactly evil, but it's not, it's definitely they want to trade one occupier for another essentially, and the Duke wants to stop that. So you've got all this really great stuff going on in terms of gameable stuff, depending on what era you're looking at. In 576, the Gold Box era, you've got this isolationist, almost besieged land, stilted in ceremony and tradition. Later on, you've got this occupied land, which is fighting against the oppression of and terror of the men from Stonefist, and then in 591, you're back into a ravaged land that is being beset by two opposing armies, but both are doing what they think is best for the land. So it's not like good versus evil; it's more like good versus neutral, which is always a neat situation when we can invert those moral conundrums. So. Anyway, that's a brief picture of the Duchy of Tenh. Again, one of my favorite places because it does have that ever-changing milieu, and you can use that in gaming purposes, and in my case, for wargaming purposes. So, in fact, I'm going to be in future. I'm going to be doing some of these at conventions, some of those battles. So, anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will talk to y'all later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.